Hey folks, Eric Scheidel here, the HVAC Service Mentor. Welcome back to the channel and glad to have you. The title of today's video is The Top 5 Mistakes HVAC Technicians Make in Troubleshooting. Now, I'm not here to rag on people. The point is that if you want to improve, if you want to get better, if you want to succeed in your career, you're going to have to understand where you're going wrong. It pays to step back for a minute and ask yourself, why did I do that? What happened there? What mistake did I make? And I definitely know what I'm talking about here because over the years I have made a lot of mistakes. And it's okay to make mistakes, but it's very important that if you do, you stop for a minute and take an opportunity to learn from them. So right now what I want to do is I want to share with you what I found over the years to be the top 5 most common mistakes service technicians make in troubleshooting and diagnostics. Starting with number 5, don't talk to the customer. And I'll go out on a call with a technician and the technician will come to the front door and they will push right past that person other than to say, where is the equipment? Where do I have to go? People who are there, they have knowledge about the system that you don't have. They might even know more about it than you do. And if you go in there thinking that you're the expert, you're the one who's going to be the knight in shining armor, and you don't need their help because they're just a layperson, you could be missing a major part of the equation. Let me tell you a little story to illustrate this situation. Residential call. 2 technicians from the company have already been out, and the customer is still having the same problem within about 2 and 3 weeks of time. So they're ticked off. They call up. Fortunately, they do call up. They don't just go elsewhere, right? They call up and say, hey, we need to get somebody out here to fix this once and for all. So I go out there and I talk to the customer. I said, tell me, what did you experience that has led to this situation? 15 minutes later, it was fixed and done. I don't think I was on the property for more than half an hour. One thing we know for certain is that problem was there when the first technician went out. That problem was there when the second technician went out. The only difference between what I did and what they did is I talked to the customer and I listened. And the customer had the answer the whole time. Number 4, shotgun repairs. When you shoot a shotgun, you don't just fire one precision bullet, you fire all kinds of pellets and they scatter out and they hit in multiple places. And it's kind of like what some HVAC technicians do when they don't know exactly what the problem is, but they know it's somewhere in this area. They don't know exactly what's wrong. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to replace a whole bunch of parts and hope that one of those is the one that solves the problem. And I'll look like the hero because I came, I saw, I put in parts, and now it works. Success. Not so much. Shotgun repairs can work, but they're not really what we want to do. We want to actually identify the problem. And there's a really big reason why that is because a lot of times the problems are situational. They're not related to parts at all, or the parts involved are failing because of some external situation that's happening. You may have a venting issue. That venting system may be right on the borderline of being okay or not okay. You may have a condensate drain problem that doesn't back up all the time. It only happens on really cold nights. You may have a vent that's freezing over, but it only happens on nights on really cold days. And so if you're replacing parts without really knowing exactly what's going on, the problem is going to come back. And if it does, the likelihood that that customer that spent all that money on you before, they may just be PO'd. They may not call back. They may be upset. They may say like, man, I gave these guys how much money? I'm still having this problem. I'm calling somebody else. And you will never hear from that customer again, which is why that process is unsustainable. It ends up actually losing money in the long run, even though the ticket totals look high because you're losing customers and you don't even know it. A little illustration. I remember many years ago, I was at a call and the customer called my company that I worked for because they were frustrated by that same experience. They had another supposedly very experienced gray-haired technician come out and he replaced all these parts. And he left all the bad parts sitting there in a pile next to the equipment. I'm going through, I troubleshoot the problem and I see this whole pile of parts sitting here, and I realized that none of these parts are related to what the problems that I found. And by the way, the problem is still there. Replacing all those parts didn't fix it. And I said, gee, I wonder what's the likelihood that all these parts are still good. I went ahead and reinstalled them, and sure enough, not a single problem with a single one of them. But that customer never called that person back again. Instead, they called us, and now we had a customer for life. So don't let you be the guy who's changing parts that aren't bad. If you can admit that you don't know something and then endeavor to find the answer, you're far better off than just BSing your way through the answer and never knowing. Number 3, they won't use a multimeter. They'll have one, it'll be in the truck, but they won't use it. Too many times I see technicians, they'll go out on a call and they'll look for the problem. They want to see it with their eyes. But you have to realize that a lot of challenges with heating or air conditioning equipment is electrical. These are electrical circuits, and electricity is invisible. And you need to have a multimeter to be able to see it. You need to be measuring voltages. You may need to be measuring amperages. You may need to be ohming out different components at the proper time. Here's another little illustration on this. Many, many years ago, I was a service technician supervisor, and I had one of the newer technicians call me up on the phone. And at that time, they were required to call me up and get authorization to replace any parts because we knew we had a bit of a problem with things not getting done right. And he calls me up and he says, Eric, I think I have a failed control board. I think we need to replace it. I said, okay, tell me why do you think that? He says, well, I'm getting voltage at the board, but the board's not working. I said, great. How much voltage did you get? He says, 120 volts. Immediately, my red flag of suspicion is going off because never have I ever, maybe once or twice, pulled out my multimeter and measured voltage and gotten exactly 120 volts. In fact, what he probably should have told me is something more along the lines of 118.9 volts. If he had said that, I probably would have believed him, but he said 120 volts, and suddenly I got suspicious. And I said, how do you know that? He's like, well, the light's turning on, but nothing's happening. I said, okay, your meter is in the truck, isn't it? He's like, yeah. Go back out there and go get it. And give me a call when you're ready, and I'll walk you through the measuring steps. But you can't just guess. And by the way, that board isn't powered by 120 volts. It's powered by 24 volts. So you definitely have something else going on. Long story short, it turned out the board was fine. We didn't end up replacing the board. It ended up being something far more simple. Number 2, they won't use a thermometer. Won't you measure temperature? It has become part of my life's work to help convince HVAC technicians who are involved in controlling the temperature of occupied spaces that it's very important to know what the temperatures are. Because so often I find that technicians will guess what the temperatures are without actually measuring them, or they will measure temperatures incorrectly. Another story to go along with this one. Get called out on a service call, commercial application, and the evaporator coil is completely frozen. And the customer who I'm talking to find out what they experienced tells me, your technician was just out here earlier today. By the way, I'm on call. It's the middle of the evening, and we just had a guy out there earlier today. So I called dude up on the phone and I said, hey, I'm back over at such and such a place. Tell me a little bit about what you did out there. And he's like, well, I did this, that, and the other thing, and it was running when I left. And I said, okay, what was the temperature drop from return to supply? He said, I don't know, but it was blowing cold air when I left. That I don't know, but it was blowing cold air. That's the problem. Come to find out, once that thing was defrosted and turned back on, it had a 37-degree temperature difference. And it should have been more in the 22-degree neighborhood. Cause of the problem was a slipping belt. It was running, it was blowing, it was cold, but it wasn't right. And if he had simply measured a temperature drop, which is a very standard performance key performance indicator, he could have solved it right then and there, and I wouldn't have had to gone out on call and done a warranty call on overtime. So measuring is very important, and how to measure and what you're comparing your measurement to, very important. And number one, doing the same thing every time in a troubleshooting situation. What do you mean by that, Eric? Well, it's very important that you go into a troubleshooting situation with a plan. And what the plan is very important. It's crucially important to realize that troubleshooting is a decision-making process. Troubleshooting is not a physical activity. You're not doing anything. You're thinking about something. Troubleshooting is a process by which you decide what to do. And the more, I guess, active or the more intentional your thought and decision-making process is, the more likely it is that the decisions you make will be good ones. And the actions that you take based on those decisions will be the right thing to do. Otherwise, you're just guessing, and the things that you do, you might be wasting energy and time. They might not even be what you need to do. Let me give you a little illustration of what I mean. When I've taught troubleshooting classes before, one of the things that I always do is I ask the whole group, what is the number one first thing you always do on a troubleshooting call? Now, the answer that I'm looking for here is talk to the customer. But the answers I get are all across the board. And one technician in particular, I recall, and I've heard this many times before, but this one guy really stands out in my mind because he was super adamant about it. He says, I always check the power supply every single time. Great. Tell me why you do that. He said, well, I don't know. That's just what I was taught to do. That's what I do. Fair enough. I can respect that. That's great. Now, let me ask you this. Of all the times that you check the power supply first, how many of those times was that actually the problem? And he said, well, almost never, right? Because he's been doing it long enough to know that, yeah, very rarely is the case of the reason why your equipment isn't working is because there's no power to it. Now, sometimes that is, but it's not all the time. And so I said, in that case, why would you check the power every single time if that's very ever rarely leading you to what the true solution is? Simply going in with the idea that I'm always going to do this no matter what is really blowing over the thought and decision-making process and is kind of going on autopilot. And in doing so, it's very, very likely that you're going to be steered in the wrong direction. Rather than starting at the beginning of the circuit, which is the power source, instead, what a person should do is begin with the thing that's not working. To do that, you have to know what your sequence of operations is. You have to see and observe where does it stop, and that is where you begin your troubleshooting, and then you work backwards to find out where is the process stopping. As a result, if you do that, you're not ever going to start in the same place every single time because every situation is a little bit different. Ideally, you should be able to know what the problem is, or at least have a very, very strong idea where to look for it with 3 tests. And if after 3 tests, you're no closer to finding the solution than when you started, you probably want to take a step back, regroup, and ask yourself, what is it I don't understand about this? Because there's something that you don't understand. And the sooner you're able to know what that is, the sooner you're able to learn it, and the sooner you're able to successfully troubleshoot that. Okay, so in a nutshell, those are the top 5 troubleshooting mistakes that I have personally seen technicians make over and over and over again. If you'd like to learn a little bit more about how to develop a repeatable troubleshooting process that you can rely on to guide you through difficult troubleshooting situations, go to my website at www.hvacservicementor.com. Look for the Tech Flicks section and find the black art of troubleshooting, because troubleshooting is an art and it's a little mysterious sometimes. So it's the black art of troubleshooting. Check that video out. Now, honestly, To really and truly explain the full process could take all day, and I've done it. I've done troubleshooting classes that lasted all day and have been life-changing for people. But 3 hours is a really great start to get you down the road. And then it's up to you to actually put the process in place and have the discipline to actually do it. And if you do, you will find yourself reducing your time on calls and increasing your accuracy, increasing your customer satisfaction, reducing your callbacks. And that is going to do nothing but help you grow as a professional technician. Let me know what you think. Put your comments down below and let me know if you have found yourself doing any of these 5 things and if you've been helped by becoming aware of that so that you can endeavor to do something more productive. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell and get updates in your inbox every time we drop a new video. My name is Eric Scheidel, the HVAC Service Mentor. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.